up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Trust Your Board podcast. Steve and Will here to go over waivers for Week 10. Will, how you doing?
Steve, doing pretty good. Excited. Got a bit of a new format here for our waiver show to a degree. So excited to try it out here.
Yeah, give it a run for the not even half a season left, but whatever is left over here.
Yeah, hey, we're building, right? This is beginning of year 2 still. So still trying to figure out the format of the show and then our Google Doc here. So yeah, excited to check it out. I think we've got some other valuable pieces that make things make more sense.
Yeah, and just kind of reorganize a little bit. We're constantly changing things. I think the only thing we really have down is the mocks at this point.
Yeah, that's the bread and butter, right?
Yeah, but with that in mind, this year we did start adding guests, and we did pivot over to Fantasy Pros once we gave up on Sleeper. So things still changing on that front too.
Yeah, well, hopefully by the time we get back, to mock season, maybe Sleeper's made some adjustments and it's better. Always down to give them another shot.
Yeah, and maybe we can bounce between, because our big issue there was ADPs, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they could fix that, but I can't see them adding like the good super flex and tight end premium stuff that we can get over at Fantasy Pros. So maybe even if they fixed ADP, we definitely like their interface a lot more, but maybe just bounce it between the two of them.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely okay to see which one works best.
Yeah, absolutely. But with that aside, you ready to jump in the waivers for the week?
Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, so we're going to start off by going over some bye week information. Will, you want to touch on who's coming off of bye and who's going on bye?
Sure. So that is definitely something that's important for waivers to figure out. So returning from bye this week, the Bengals, the Browns, the Eagles, and the Rams. So keep an eye out for any of those players that, may have gone, been dropped last week and, post waiver claims, you may be able to get a value on a guy that probably should be owned. So keep an eye on those teams coming back. While the Chiefs, Cowboys, Falcons, and Jets are heading on bye. So keep an eye come waiver day on Wednesday morning. See if any of those players are dropped that are valuable. If you have room on your roster, maybe worth an add, even though you won't get them this week. Could be something that you can use down the stretch run. Yeah,
and it'll be a big week for waivers with those teams going on by. You got a ton of players on the Chiefs being rostered and used. A lot of people on the Falcons offense. A lot of people in the Cowboys offense still owned. I'm sure their usage is kind of wavered. And Jets not so much, but they're your easy matchup for your quarterback streamers and whatnot. So still impacting you. But couple big teams there.
Seems fitting the Chiefs and Jets would be on the same, because there's probably combined 2 teams worth of fantasy players on the Chiefs and Jets.
Yeah, right. It makes perfect sense. But if you got anyone on those teams looking to pick somebody up to help get you to buy, let's go over some people. Our first one, not a ton of availability there at the running back position for Mr. Mike Davis. Still rostered in 73% of leagues, but it looks like CMC's going down again. So somebody did drop him. I'm assuming you're breaking the bank to get him out, right?
Yeah, and I had him there. As we mentioned, he's about 73% owned, so most leagues he's not going to be there. But I do imagine there were some leagues where, someone saw that CMC's back, figured Davis wasn't going to have much of a role, and cut him. Or even, post-game, he didn't have a huge role and maybe cut him, yesterday as news breaks here Monday that there may be a shoulder injury for McCaffrey. We'll see what happens. Interesting thing there I was reading is that with the rule, you do have the IR that you can put a player on for 3 weeks, but that is a one-time thing. So if the player goes back on IR, that ends their season. So McCaffrey is either not on IR or his season's over.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting.
So they have to active roster him, basically, if they want to keep him.
It's a shoulder injury, right?
Yep. I believe it was the very last play of the game, though.
Yeah, I feel like that's not something that typically keeps you out for, 6 weeks or, what have you, to get us to the end of the season. But, another solid 2 or 3 to and then, from there, you're going to be looking at the fantasy playoffs, and from a, actual football standpoint, you're getting to the end of the Panthers season. They're not going to really be pushing for the playoffs, I don't think. So, why would you?
6?
Yeah, I mean, why would you use CMC to his full capacity? Mm-hmm. He's been injured twice this year. if you play him at all, I would imagine you would split him out with Mike Davis just to keep him healthy and ready for next year.
Yeah. The next couple weeks are interesting. We've got Tampa this week, who obviously got demolished last night, but it's a pretty good defense overall. So maybe not the easiest matchup, but then Detroit and Minnesota leading up to the bye. So, maybe their bye is coming up in, after the next 3 games. So maybe that plays into the injury. We'll see. But if they do want to make a playoff push, pretty much got to win out from here with the way their division's looking.
Yeah, absolutely. J.D. McKissic, next up on our list here, only rostered in 24% of leagues, so pretty low. He's got Detroit this week. That's a good matchup. Had a decent week this week, but he's hard to trust. Very up and down. Do you like McKissic? Yeah. Would you be bidding on him?
I'd say really just PPR, maybe half point, because the stat I saw is he ran a league high 31 routes in week 9 for running backs. So. Definitely going to be on the field, definitely going to be getting the dump offs. We still have Antonio Gibson to deal with there, but it really seems like a 4-man show with McLaurin, Logan Thomas as the receiver options, and then both running backs as the receiving options out of the backfield. So definitely someone I wouldn't mind rostering. And it seemed, with a whopping 14 targets that he had this week, that Alex Smith likes him and is going to dump it off. So if you have injuries, wouldn't mind picking them up and probably not spending a ton, right? In running back land, usually, someone's going to bid up, but I don't know that I bid, more than 10 or 15. Probably does have season-long value, but maybe not the ceiling that you'd be looking for.
Yeah, and we saw last time Alex Smith came in, he used McKissic a lot. So there's definitely a connection there, but yeah, I'm with you. Toss something at him, $5, $6, $7 if you need a running back depth play, because the targets are going to be there. He's going to establish a floor for you, but without an injury to Gibson, I'm not sure the ceiling's really there.
Yeah, I agree. So next up, we have Duke Johnson with the concussion injury to David Johnson. Still uncertain, but if David Johnson misses, a week plus, what do you think about Duke Johnson in that offense?
Interesting. I know he's I don't want to say polarizing because it's not like a love-hate, but you got some people that still feel really strongly about Duke. I'm not one of those people at all. A lot of people saw him going into Houston and thought they seemingly acted like he was going to be like a top 5 running back. I'm kind of going to an extreme here, but they hyped him up a lot and I just didn't believe it. And lo and behold, it didn't work out. He couldn't beat out Carlos Hyde. Not beating out a broken David Johnson. So I don't love him. I don't think he's going to be the savior of your season by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think he's going to steal that job from David Johnson. But with that in mind, he's a pass catching running back. He's definitely going to get utilized. And, he'll probably, I think I'd rather own him than McKissic. McKissic might get more work in the passing game, but, Duke Johnson's also going to get the rushing yards. So I'd rather face off between the two. I'd rather have Duke. I'm just not expecting him to be some savior like I know a lot of people might be thinking, because a lot of people still like him a lot. What about you?
Yeah, and I think it's still uncertainty there too, right? It is a concussion protocol that David Johnson will have to pass through. So if, he does have all week here, if he does pass through it, Duke kind of reverts back to that second fiddle role in an offense that, he wasn't super utilized before. His high water mark was 6.7 half point PPR fantasy points before this week. So, he's clearly fiddle number 2 behind David Johnson if David Johnson's healthy. So it is a speculative ad as well. And he did score. I think that really saved his fantasy day, but seems like he would get a lot of targets and, usage on the ground if David Johnson goes down. So I guess really kind of focus on David Johnson's health and news leading up to, Tuesday night and submitting your waiver bids. And if things seem to be trending one way or the other, that, could swing how much you bid on him, whether he becomes a starter this week or likely just a depth play behind David Johnson.
Yep, absolutely. And another guy that has taken on the role after an injury, you have Wayne Gallman. Found the end zone again this week. Still only 25% owned. Do you like Gallman at all?
Yeah, you and I talked about him for our Dynasty League. We scooped him up a couple weeks ago, and he's, been usable. 14 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown this week. think he only had one catch, right? But, you have Deion Lewis there that's likely going to get your target. So you're really banking on the carries. As long as, Devontae Freeman is out, Wayne Gallman's usable. So once again, it's going to be contingent. You're going to have to keep an eye on how Devontae Freeman is trending to see if you're going to add him. But he's definitely someone that I think you can plug and play if you're in a bad situation. Most of the time you're not going to love it because their team makeup isn't, great for a running back running downhill with the amount of turnovers that they have. But the defense looked good last week, so we'll see. Another NFC matchup against the Eagles this week. Usually stout against the run, but have been getting beat a little more. Both teams are prone to turnovers, so you never know when you're going to have a short field, which helps your running back out. Maybe it's an easy punch in. If Devontae Freeman doesn't play, I think Wayne Gallman is not a bad flex option, but I don't know that you are going to have any clarity there leading up into waivers tomorrow night.
Yeah, and that's the issue when it comes to how much would you bid on him, because you don't know what's going to happen. And then even if Freeman's out, like you said, he's a good running back to have, but he's got a tough matchup, and it could only be 1 week. So, it's tough to put a price on him because you're not sure. It really depends on how desperate you are. If you really need a running back shot, something over $10, 10, 11, 12, or I guess percentages if you're doing more than 100, 13% maybe. If you're not that desperate and just need a depth play, 6, 7, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think what I would probably more realistically do is, kind of lump McKissick, Duke Johnson, Bowman, maybe one or two of the other guys we'll talk about here, and kind of throw a bid on all of them for $5-6, and you can rank them the way you want them, but not have to overpay for any of them. And because most of the guys we're going to talk about here are either pure timeshare like McKissick or banking on the guy ahead of them not playing. So it's really a lottery ticket. So you can maybe get a cheap one at a $5 bid, and maybe you luck out, maybe you don't. But I think that's kind of the move here outside of Mike Davis and possibly the next guy we'll talk about. I think everyone else is kind of just throwing in, a lottery ticket.
Yeah. So next one up was Gus Edwards. Still only 37% owned. He does have New England, which is a tougher matchup, but getting plenty of work. Do you like Gus?
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly the goal line back. They went to him over and over. Dobbins, I think, disappointed a bit. He had decent usage, but overall, you could tell Gus was the guy they were putting in on the goal line. I think he got stuffed once, but got in another time on the one goal line trip that I was watching. And, the last 3 games in half-point PPR here, he did 8.5, 14.5, and 8.5. So 3 tough defenses, statistically with Philly, Pittsburgh, and Indy. It's tough. And, you got New England, Tennessee, Pittsburgh again. But if you need a play, he's a guy that, is going to get carries as long as Ingram's still out. And this timeshare is just 2. So, I don't mind it. Maybe somewhere in the 5 to 10 range. Maybe he's the guy that I put highest on that list of, 6 or 7 guys.
Yeah, I agree. But probably, Mike Davis is clearing above the top guy, but Edwards, after that, definitely pretty high up. The next 3, we're going to lump them together because it's all so iffy with all of them.
Same city, too.
Indeed, all the same city. You got Cam Akers, 30% owned, does have Seattle. Has the Henderson injury ahead of him. We got Josh Kelly, 42% owned against Miami. Had a great start to the year, been fading off. And then Kalen Ballage, who has been taking over a little bit for Kelly, only 1% owned, also facing Miami, obviously. Who do you like out of that group?
I mean, Cam Akers, I think if he plays, he's got a great matchup. We'll talk about it later, but I like Jared Goff this week. He hasn't been great, but, he has a good matchup there against Seattle. So if Henderson misses, Akers and Brown likely split, but Akers seems to be the more explosive back. So I think he could be a guy that you might be able to get cheap and be able to plug in. Kelly and Ballage, I don't really love either, especially if Justin Jackson is healthy, but Ballage is the one that looked better in the game, so he's the one that I probably would throw a bit in for. But once again, it just seems like it's going to be a muddy backfield until Eckler gets back. So, maybe in that 5, 6, 7 range for Ballage. Same thing for Kelly. I'd probably lean Balaj out of the two of them.
Yeah, I agree. Akers would be a great start if Henderson's out. I mean, I say he's a great start. It could just be the Malcolm Brown show, but he's a solid start where Kelly's been fading. I don't see a lot of confidence in playing him. Mm-hmm. Balaj has looked good, but we have a history of no confidence in him. So I'd definitely rather avoid that situation if need be. Akers definitely above the 3. If you force me to pick between Kelly and Balaj, I guess I would go with Balaj. He seems like the high hand right now, but yeah, I'd much rather avoid both. I guess Balaj also has a revenge game, if that matters to you.
Well, with that, move over to wide receivers.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the wide receivers here. Curtis Samuel with a big week. Much to the chagrin of us DJ Moore owners out there.
Yeah.
Only 30% owned, has Tampa this week. He's definitely out there in a lot of leagues. You liking him?
Yeah, I am. In our work league, I got some flack for picking him up. Someone said chasing the points there, and then I unfortunately was in a situation where I had to, pick up and play someone, and it really lucked out there. Curtis Samuel looked great once again. This is, I think, 3 weeks in a row of a double-digit and half point. He had 22 this week for us. So I think someone you got to stay in the flames with. All 3 of the receivers, I think you can play, and you're hoping that you get, one of the 2 that put up some points. And they got Tampa this week, who should be ready to, put some points up after that dud. So, yeah, Curtis Samuel, don't like to spend up on any receiver, really, but, in that 10-ish range, 10 or 12, if you really need someone, know that it's a boomer bust play, right? You maybe give a couple carries, couple targets, and hope that he can get in the end zone like he has been.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It always comes down to the end zone. And when you have a team with, the quality of wide receiver that they have, it could be any one of them or any given week. At this point, it's pretty fair to say that typically you're going to have 2 of them that you're going to be quite happy with and one of them that you're not going to be happy with at all. And it's just a roll of the dice as to which one it is this week. So it's definitely a solid ad for sure. I agree with you on the pricing there. We'll move on to Rieger. Got the Giants. Still only 24% owned. That really surprised me. I thought people would be waiting for him off of his injury, but maybe got dropped for the bye.
Yep. Cam Akers, Jalen Rieger here, showing that there are guys that are available off their bye week that, maybe are a little more expensive if they just came off a week where they played.
Yeah, and he's definitely somebody that I would pay up for. I mean, I would be willing to pay more for him than I would Samuel, depending on my team's position, because the upside's there. Like, Samuel has good upside, but I don't think it's going to be consistent upside. Where Rieger has upside for the entire season. Now it's the Eagles offense. He could just be absolutely nothing. We find that kind of hard to believe given they're so desperate for weapons, but it's definitely possible. But I think I'd be willing to pay up a little bit more if I really need a wide receiver help. Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, he seems to, as long as he remains healthy, have, rest of season play, right? He's probably in that flex consideration. Given that Alshon may play this week, who knows when Jackson will be back, but Rager's probably got the most burst out of all of them. You still have Fulgham. That is going to be more of your big body player. So, I think until Jackson gets back, Rager seems to be the after the catch guy, the, deep threat that you have. So yeah, I wouldn't mind paying, in the 10-ish range, 15 if you really are high on him and want to get that upside shot.
Yeah, next on our list, we have Alan Lazard, who was looking good before he went down the injury. We'll have to see what he is when he gets back. Still 38% owned, which is interesting. His ownership is higher despite not being back than Rieger, who is back, which is curious. Again, maybe it comes down to the bye weeks or something, but they have Jacksonville. He's an interesting ad. What do you think?
Yeah, and I imagine teams that have IRs, Lazard was on IR, so maybe he was able to be rostered still. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like anyone stepped up as wide receiver 2. MVS had, 2 big touchdowns, but I think he only had 4 targets on the game, so not thrilled about that. So yeah, I mean, he's someone that I would pick up as a speculative ad. I don't, think I want to pay up for him because you just still don't know what you're going to get, but and when you'll get it, I imagine he comes back this week, but I'm not positive. So, somewhere in the 5 to 10 range if you want to have him as your kind of upside wide receiver that you can plug in. But I probably I'm not playing him this week.
Yeah, agreed. I don't, we didn't see a wide receiver step up. I mean, MVS had some games. We saw Equinemius St. Brown have some opportunities and drop some passes. We did see Tanyan emerge as a credible touchdown threat. And, I don't think that's going to go away. So that definitely is going to hurt Lazard from a touchdown standpoint. But he's definitely somebody that I'd be willing to add for a couple bucks, 2 or 3, with the hope that he's coming back and to see if he can return to his form for the first couple weeks, because it was really good. I'm not expecting a whole lot, because that's just been the second running back for the Green Bay for the past few years. Just expectations have to be kind of low.
Second wide receiver.
Yeah, second wide receiver. Sorry.
We want to move on to the future Hall of Famer, though.
Yeah. Richie James.
Rich James. Yeah,
Richie James. Yeah, 2% owned, facing New Orleans.
13 for 184 yards and a touchdown on Thursday. Feels like a while ago, but
yeah, I mean, he's interesting. I don't mind owning him to see if the trend continues, because we know Mullen can dish the ball out a lot. That's really no surprise. And they have a ton of injuries. So ideally someone steps up. I would just struggle to actually put him in my active roster, because it's 100 yards or it's 0. There's no guarantee that he does anything. So he's worrisome. If I'm really desperate, I wouldn't mind adding him, but I'd struggle to start him. But you could take a shot, and the situation's there where he could emerge. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I wouldn't be banking on it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the perfect scenario to play him is the exact same lineup is out there, right? So Debo misses again, and Ayuk, I think he only missed because of the COVID proximity. So I think you'd have to have likely Ayuk and Debo out. I mean, maybe you have Debo in and Richie James is your downfield guy. But if Ayuk's in, I'm probably a little more hesitant to play Richie James. I think he's going to be added everywhere, right? When you have that big of a game, maybe, everyone's going to have at least one person in their league that's thinking, maybe this is the time, this is the breakout, It's the Fulgham, right? You have one big game and it just snowballs, but you don't see it too often. So I don't know how much I'm willing to spend, which probably limits any chance I have of getting him, because someone will see that.
Yeah, somebody will pay up.
Pay for the points that happened already, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm paying, 5-ish, maybe a little more, but I doubt that gets it done.
Yep, probably. Gonna go ahead, Will, and lump our last 4 wide receivers together, because they're kind of all in that category of solid, but they're not super trustworthy. We have a Mooney out there in Chicago, 14% owned. Sterling Shepard, 51% owned. Patrick, 21% owned. And Michael Pittman, 7% owned in Indy. Do any of them interest you? Is there someone that you really like out of that group, or someone that you really don't like out of that group?
Well, I'll say the first 3 are kind of, as you mentioned, kind of reliable guys, from what we've seen when they've played and been healthy. Pittman is one that interests me because he, obviously going against a really tough Ravens defense, wasn't a wide receiver 1 because T.Y. Hilton didn't play. And he had 7 targets, caught 4 for 56, didn't get in the end zone, but in a tough matchup in his first game back from a really major injury with, I believe, an artery in his leg, that from what I understand, if it wasn't caught when it was, there was chance that they would have had to have major surgery and he may even have lost his leg. But it sounds like it was a miracle find that cost him, most of the season already. But he comes back game 1 back playing, and he has, a good 4 for 7, 56 yards against a tough defense. I think he's the guy that I would want to get a speculative add in for, especially, there's not a ton of really difficult defenses on the schedule the rest of the way. I see Pittsburgh and maybe Green Bay, but other than that, there's teams that can be beaten. So maybe Pittman is one of those rookie receivers that turns it on in the second half of the year. We see it with rookies all the time. He's the guy I probably would throw a claim in. Probably don't got to spend more than 5 on him. Most people are going to be going for Mooney, Shepard, Patrick, some of the guys ahead of him. But someone that I think I want to roster and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. It's Pittman for me as well. You mentioned a good game. He was also, I forget if it was one or two, but there was at least one like bomb pass that they just misconnected on. And if he catches that, it's a much different story for the week, and you're really happy with things there. So yeah, I would take the upside shot there. It's nothing against Mooney, Shepard, and Patrick. As we've said, they're solid guys with decent floors. They could pop off a good week here and there, like an upside week here and there, but they lack the consistent upside, as I've mentioned earlier in the episode, that a Pittman could end up having.
Yeah, so next up we have tight ends. First one here that sticks out, and from what I've seen, his ads were getting higher, right? He's up to 40, looks like 41% now, so I guess some leagues don't have waivers that he's getting added in. That's Austin Hooper, likely starting tight end this week for Cleveland. I know he missed the last few games, but seemed to be coming on a little more and letting him run more routes and block less as the season's gone on for the injury. What do you think about Austin Hooper?
I'm really just not interested. I don't know why. I mean, part of it's just the usage of the tight end position for the Browns in the past few years. You have the big games that happen every once in a while. Like, remember last year, it was Ricky Seals-Jones had one game where he had like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns or something insane like that. And then he never did it again. And so you see these games from them, but overall, I don't know if it was maybe the old system and maybe it's just Hooper's adjustment to the new system. So he hasn't been coming along, but like you said, his usage was getting better, or maybe if Baker just doesn't prefer the tight end, but now you don't have OBJ, so maybe he does. I don't know. I mean, he could be fine. If you're really desperate, he's a fine ad. He falls in the category of me struggling to start him for a couple weeks, but it's
a risk. It's totally a risk playing week one back. And, but out of the guys we'll talk about, there's maybe one or two that I think are like pick up and plug in and play right away. Hooper's someone that, if you really have to, you can plug him in. If you have room and you have like a shaky tight end, you can pick up and see. But the last 3 games, or 2.5 really, before he got hurt, 5 catches on 7 targets for 34 yards and a touchdown in week 4, 5 catches on 10 targets for 57 yards. 5, and then 5 catches on 6 targets for 52 yards in a shortened game against Pittsburgh. So, I mean, they clearly were trying to get him involved more. He misses, 2 games after that before the bye, but I think he's someone that if that's in the game plan and they want to work him in, he could easily work his way up to the number 2 receiving option, not counting the running backs. But you do get Chubb back this week, so as long as he is healthy and playing, you'll imagine that there's going to be less just attempts to go around. So we'll see. I mean, I've never been much on tight ends, but he's one that I wouldn't mind.
Indeed. We have Logan Thomas, still only 37% owned. We talk about him a lot. He's got a solid floor. He gets a lot of targets. So he's a good floor play at tight end. Do you really have anything to add to that? We don't want to rehash the same conversations, really.
Yeah, he's a solid full play. He's probably going to be here on here all the time because, there's only a few tight ends you can play. So, he's probably someone that, I wouldn't mind playing him and having Hooper on my bench, hoping that Hooper pops and then being able to switch to Hooper for, the rest of the season. But he's one of those just solid options that if you don't have a guy that could go off, he's a guy you can fall back to.
We know we both like Goddard. 55% owned, so he's still out there in about half a league. So I don't think we need to touch on Goddard. Everyone loves Goddard. Jordan Reed, I think people were expecting more from, and him and Dwelly really didn't do anything. He's 23% owned. Would you be okay taking a shot on Jordan Reed or no?
Not really. I mean, he's out there, and he's kind of, a lesser Logan Thomas for me. A guy that's going to get some targets, but probably doesn't have the huge playability. Probably banking on a touchdown, as most tight ends are. Same thing with Jimmy Graham, who's also on here, 49% owned. But yeah, Goddard, I'd say, he seemed like he may have been, more of a decoy 2 weeks ago. He only had a few targets, just got healthy, so maybe they just wanted to put him out there. So I expect to see him more in the game plan with 2 full weeks off. So he's someone I would definitely want to add. And last up, Tyler Higbee, 54% owned. Great matchup against Seattle. We saw what Buffalo was able to do to him. I don't know if Cooper Kupp is going to miss. I know he was injured going into the bye, but if he for some reason does, that opens up a lot of targets. So Higbee is someone you haven't been able to trust, but it's a good matchup. So in a bad tight end landscape, he's not a bad play this week.
Yeah, if you need the upside shot, it's there, but the floor is nothing. I think he was out targeted like 9-4 or 8-4 or something like that compared to Everett.
Involved.
Exactly. So he's worrisome, but yeah, like you said, the upside's there because of the matchup.
Mm-hmm.
So let's touch on our streaming quarterbacks here, Will. We got 5 listed. We'll just name them all off. We got Goff against Seattle, Tua against the Chargers, Carr against Denver, Lock against Vegas, Bridgewater against Tampa. Who do you like out of this group? Give her 2 or 3 here that you like.
Yeah, I mean, Goff's probably the one. He's 63% owned, so he's probably not out there a ton. But once again, coming off the bye, 2/3, 1/3 of you have an option there. So if you need a quarterback to play, great matchup, good quarterback, good weapons around him. So, the formula is there to be a great stream. Then I'd say Tua and Lock have the best matchups. He's still a little riskier, especially with Lock not being able to get that against Atlanta. That was tough to see. Tua looked legit. I mean, obviously, it was a tough game. They end up pulling it out and defeating Arizona, which is a very good team. But their defense is good, too. Tua was able to get that on the ground, which you'd love to see out of your quarterback. So it's scary, but he's someone that I probably don't mind streaming this week if, Goff's off the table and most of the other quarterbacks are gone.
Yeah, it's definitely Goff for me. I think most people would agree with that. My conservative nature is going to come out with when it comes to the quarterbacks, and Tua's got the matchup. He did look better, but 50-50, one bad game, one good game is not enough for me. Mm-hmm. So I'll pass on Tua. I like the Carr and Lock matchups a little bit better. Of the two, probably Lock for the matchup against Vegas. But I like both of them. Bridgewater, not really in consideration. Tougher matchup, but
even with the blowout loss, I mean, I imagine Tampa's coming out with a vengeance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Defense, at least.
Yeah, you would think so. So Goff, Carr, and Lock for me. Tua not a bad play if you want to take that risk.
No, not the best defensive streaming options this week. There's a couple we have. Eagles against the Giants on the road. Saints at home for the Niners. Packers at home for the Jaguars. And then the Giants at home for the Eagles. Giants and Eagles are interesting just because both of the offenses are prone to turn the ball over. So you're, kind of dancing with the devil there, but you could be, probably low floor, high ceiling play for defense. Saints and Packers for me are probably the defenses that you're just banking on going against backup quarterbacks. Anybody there specifically call out to you out of those 4?
The Eagles are the big one. Part of that's because the turnover nature of the Giants, part of that because they're coming off the bye, and I tend to like that, as I think I've mentioned in the past. That also turns me off with the Giants. Not a bad play because of Philly, but again, Philly's coming off the bye, so that worries me a little bit there. The Saints aren't a bad play, but we've seen a fair bit of Mullins. We know he can light it up if he wants to. So between the Saints and the Packers, I would rather go to the Packers. I feel more comfortable there. Maybe that's, I have a little bit of bias towards San Francisco, but I don't think saying that Mullins can light it up is anything controversial. He's had plenty of good games.
Yeah, we've seen it.
Yeah, we have. So I think Eagles number 1 for me pretty easily, and then Packers number 2. How about you?
Yeah, I'm probably looking at the Eagles and the Packers. I mean, the Saints are interesting the way they were playing it. But I think it's mostly Eagles, Packers, Saints, Giants. But yeah, something about the Saints seems sneaky. I mean, they seem to have some confidence going, especially against Tampa. I think maybe you get some turnovers, give up some points. So we'll see. All are, decent streaming options.
Yeah, absolutely. That is going to take care of our waiver show. Will, do you have any closing thoughts here?
No, just as always, good luck everybody in week 10 and then on your waiver specifically here. Make sure I'd say always take a look around at your leagues and your teams in your league this week, right? We're halfway through the year. See who has a lot of bid left and who bids, who doesn't, right? May be able to use that to your advantage when if you're using the fab waivers. Use to manage the information that's there. Not everyone's looking at everybody else's fabs.
Yeah, absolutely. Tune in on Thursday for our Start Sit show. Until then, folks, trust your board.